Okay, we're not going to go back and read all the things that actually kind of tell you, but basically this is talking about Jesus Christ and who he is. And so we're going to, I'll just start from verse 15. And it says, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things consist. And he is the head, of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he may have the preeminence. And so I read that basically because it's talking about Christ and how all things were created that are in heaven by him, where all things were created by him. And that we were created by him, for him. And so when you hear people talking about being created to worship God, that's our purpose and our intent. Before we do anything else, before we lead worship, before we preach a sermon, before we serve food to the hungry, before we heal the sick, before we do any type of missions, we were created first to worship God. So as worshipers and leaders and musicians, psalmists, Levites, whatever you want to call yourself, our first assignment is to worship the Father, to worship the King. And what else did I have there? Okay. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and you can write this down, is Genesis 1:26, that we are created in the image and the likeness of him. So he created us in his image and after his likeness. So when we worship him, we don't worship him from we worship him from a place of being just like him. And it's because it's just simply because he's God, and because that's how he made us, and that he made us to reflect his image and to reflect his glory in the earth. So when we worship him, it's like glory reflecting glory. So we're made in his image and his likeness. And so when we worship him, we simply give back to him what he gave to us. And so I thought those scriptures would be good for you all to know and to take with you as worshipers and as worship leaders, and understanding who you are and who God created you to be. Now, and I'll give you some other things some other scriptures to look at, to read on your own about those who are actually called to lead worship, because there are those who are actually called to lead people into the presence of God. And so I'll give you some scriptures on those as well. And then one other scripture I want us to look at, but I want to wait and go there, not right this second, but John chapter 4, so you guys can go ahead and turn there if you want to. And the one thing I was going to say is, does anybody know what worship is? I was going to ask, what is worship? Brother Salim?
It's a lifestyle. Mm-hmm. It's what I know of it. It's a gift. It's a gift, and you gotta take it seriously. Mm-hmm. It's not how I was taught when I was coming up. My grandmother was about kingdom faith, and she poured in things to me, and she told me about you couldn't say certain things, you couldn't say God's name in vain, and she just taught me lessons. And like when I was young, I didn't understand it, but she was crazy. But I understand it now through through the years. Though she passed, the lessons and the things she taught me.
Okay.
That's a big part. It's a lifestyle.
Good. That's real good. Was anybody else gonna say anything else other than worship is a lifestyle?
Yes, worship is, to me, it's the way you communicate with God and how it's like that's the intimacy between you and God and your fellowship and, Him speaking to you and you speaking back to Him, but it's a personal communication, just like you are with your husband and nobody else is around. That's just you and God and your time to love on each other and commune.
Good. Good. Anybody else had anything else they would say? I would say both of those things are very true and very accurate, very good about what worship is. And I would say I wanted to also talk about what worship is not. Worship is not a song specifically. Worship is not just the lifting of your hands, and it's not just slow songs. Worship is not just slow songs.
Yeah, right.
And so I was trying to think of some other things, but those are a couple things that a lot of times people think that's what worship is. I can tell you that worship is a posture of the heart. It's where your heart is in relationship with you and the Father. And I can tell you what worship does. Worship brings you, like she says, to that place of intimacy with God, where you can commune with Him, but where He also can commune with you. Because a lot of times it's in worship where God will show you.
Yes.
The things that you won't necessarily deal with just on it's almost like He woos you into His presence to let you know, now, precious. Pumpkin precious. That thing that you are holding dear to your heart that is killing you silently, like forgiveness, you don't have to let that go. But sometimes you don't, it's when you get in God's presence and He can really deal with you from that place, that worship opens up that place and allows God to be able to saturate and brings you into His presence, where He can deal with you. Is there anything else?
I just wanted to add something to that. One of the things, worship is a service. It's not a worship. We always say, worship service starts at this time. Worship, that's just the act of worship. And then when she was talking about, God speaking to you once you get into this time of worship, there's a reason that He reveals those things to us in those times of worship. And it's because when you look at the temple design where the outer court and the inner court comes into play, you can't carry some things into the inner court. Those things can only be present in the outer court. So when you're dealing with, the outer court is public, it's visible, it's where the Levites came to visibly do things, but then they had to enter into the inner court and this is a sacred place. So when you have that unforgiveness and all these things that you're dealing with in the outer court, once you enter into the inner court and God begins to speak to you, He starts to reveal those things to you so that you can get that off of you before you enter into this holy place, because this is a place where you and I commune. You can't bring your outside life in here. You can't bring those issues in here. You can't bring your insecurities in here. You can't bring your failures in here. In here, it's me and you. This is intimate relationship, and there's some things you can't bring in here. So when we enter, before we're on our way, I would say the interim between the inner court, the outer court, and the inner court. This is where God is revealing all these things to you and saying, sweetheart, you gotta, that's what He calls me, sweetheart, you gotta leave that out there because you can't bring this in here with me. So there's a reason why when you get into that time of worship, you're shown these things because He wants you to go deeper and deeper. We're called from the outer court. When you are a worship leader and you're called to it, he's calling you from the outer court worship into the inner court worship, and he needs you to get these things off of you so that when you enter in, you're clean. And nobody has to, pull your string to drag you out from behind the veil. Your bell's still ringing while you're in there because you're still alive. You're still moving. So I just wanted to add that.
Go on, girl. They ain't got to pull you out.
They ain't got to pull you out. Stay in there.
Yeah, that's good, because you still alive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bells
So you
still
know when you didn't hear the bells, baby, that meant the priest died.
That mean it's gone. That mean he took something behind the veil. Wasn't supposed to go back there.
Go back there.
Can I say something that I personally am concerned about here?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's not a put down or anything, but just because I guess we're not used to flowing in worship. It seems to me that we seem to be more interested in going to the next song or the next thing rehearsed or the next thing planned, and that we don't allow the flow of God to take us into that place where the song is no longer the song we learned, but the song we're now hearing. And that's a concern that I have, because as a worshiper myself, that's where I want the people to go, and that's where I want the church to go. That's the atmosphere that I'm anointed to move in. And when that anointing isn't set in the house, then my ability, it's like my grace to do has been cut off. You understand what I'm saying? So if you can, I don't know how you teach that or how you...
Or it makes you have to do everything.
To do it.
Because in order to get you where you need to be, you have to come along and still foster that atmosphere yourself to get you where, and then to do what.
Sometimes by the time I do all of that,
Yeah.
I don't have any reserve. I don't have nothing. It just kind of takes everything to take the worship there. And when I get the people there, then now I've got to bring the deliverance, and I got to bring the message. So I need my worship team to be able to move into that area. And I don't know how to,
Go ahead.
Can I say something really quick though too? That sometimes, Pastor, sometimes people aren't as receptive to receive from the worship team. And I see this so much as they are a pastor.
Yeah.
When she says, okay, everybody get up, everybody listen. But we're like, come on, let's go. And they're just like,
well, see, this is another thing. And I'm glad she said that, because
there's a lot of that going on around.
I'm glad she said that, because this is a dry area when it comes to work. People here really are not, they don't really. I don't think they understand.
I think it's a little.
But I tell you something else. Here's what I feel. Let me share something with you that the Lord gave me a long time ago, because in ministry, I go to a lot of places that are dry. I go to a lot of places that are dead. I go to a lot of places that don't know me or know what I do. And they don't necessarily respect me because they don't know me. You understand what I'm saying? And my concern in going was always, Lord, well, how do I do what I do in this atmosphere? The Lord gave me a vision one time. And the vision was a huge table. And I couldn't even see to the end of the table. And on the table were all of these different type of bowls and utensils, and they were in shapes I had never seen before, different colors, different things, everything. To make a long story short, when I looked in each of the bowls, there were different stuff. There was all kind of different foods. I never saw different things like that. And I'm thinking, Lord, why are you showing me this? He said this to me: you eat first, and you tempt them to eat.
That's right.
He said, because if you eat it,
That's
then
right.
you can tempt them to have it.
That's
I
it.
think sometimes we get to, it's like, we're so busy saying, come on, go with me. Well, they can't go if they've never been. But if you flow,
Because you can't take somebody somewhere.
you can't take them if you're not.
Jodi.
And if you're on, if your concern is, come on, go, come on and go, you still standing here while you're trying to get them to go. But if I can get my team to go, then the people will learn to flow and go, because they're exposed exposed to it. That's like going into a church. If we were to come to your ministry, you're not gonna sit there and stop doing what you do because we don't know what to do. You're gonna flow. So either we're gonna catch up with the flow and move with the flow, or we'll be left out the flow. But if the flow is continuous, the people will start to flow. So that's my concern,
Okay,
you know.
okay. JJ has something, and then I have something to talk about that, speak on that as well, and I didn't know if you had something too. Okay, go ahead, JJ. Did you remember?
First of all, yeah, like, how often do y'all practice flowing in worship? You know what I mean? When I'm talking about
Practice
Flowing.
flowing worship.
Yeah, because that was my
Flowing
thing.
in worship.
You have to
When I say
learn to
that-
practice the practice.